P. Diddy makes a third attempt to be released on bail, and this time it could actually happen. A new U.S. District Court judge has been appointed to the case, and now it's going to be up to him whether Diddy is released. Meanwhile, he's still behind bars in a Brooklyn jail that, according to his attorneys, has deplorable conditions. We're taking a closer look at Diddy's day-to-day life incarcerated and his road to a possible release with attorney Randy Kessler. I'm Gillespie, and this is Law & Crime News. 54-year-old Sean P. Diddy Combs is entering his fourth week behind bars, being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. It's a far cry from his lavish life and mansions in Miami and Los Angeles, but ironically, it was the evidence collected at those mansions that put Diddy in jail in the first place. Back in March, federal investigators raided Diddy's homes in Florida and California, collecting evidence in the federal case against him. We now have a better idea about what investigators were collecting, including multiple AR-15 rifles with the serial numbers removed, a drum magazine, and illegal drugs. But Diddy doesn't face any charges for possession of those items. Instead, it was the electronic evidence that led to Diddy's charges. On September 16th, he was indicted by a federal grand jury on charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. A main topic discussed in this indictment was freak-offs, described as elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. And the government alleges these freak-offs were not consensual. The indictment lays out a pattern of abuse that Diddy would often follow, drugging or forcing the victims to drink alcohol that was oftentimes laced with something, sexually assaulting these victims, and then forcing them to have sex with a prostitute. Now, the feds say they have evidence of these freak-offs because Diddy often recorded them. Investigators apparently have dozens of freak-off videos and collected more than 100 cell phones, laptops, cloud storage accounts, and storage devices. They allege Diddy used the sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating recordings that he made during the freak-offs as collateral to ensure the continued obedience and silence of the victims. So these same recordings that were once used to keep victims quiet are now being used to prosecute Diddy in a sex trafficking scheme that goes back decades. The allegations against Diddy go back a while too, with survivors reporting abuse as far back as 1991. Last November, Cassandra Ventura, Diddy's ex, filed civil suit against him, citing years of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse during their relationship. Cassie mentioned the freak-offs, saying Diddy recorded them and used them to keep her quiet. After that, a dozen more civil suits were filed against Diddy, and they all followed the same pattern, alleging he drugged the victims, assaulted them, and recorded it. These lawsuits paved the way for Diddy's indictment and arrest, and there's actually more on the way. Weeks after Diddy's arrest, Houston-based attorney Tony Busby revealed he's planning to file 120 new civil lawsuits against Diddy with even more shocking allegations. These lawsuits will apparently include allegations of child sex abuse too. In one case, a kid as young as 9 years old. The lawsuits are also expected to reveal at least one high-profile name that was involved in Diddy's scheme and participated in the freak-offs. But for now, Diddy remains the only one charged in the case, and that's what led him to MDC in Brooklyn. If you're watching this video, you're a fan of Law & Crime, and I know that means you're all go-getters. Some of you may even be starting your own business or a new side hustle. That's why I want to talk to you about our amazing sponsor, Odoo. It's a free all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications that help with the day-to-day of owning a business. That's things like managing PTO, customer relations, or even different subscriptions. Now here's the kicker. You can try Odoo for free right now without even entering your credit card. You can also get free lifetime access to one of the apps in the Odoo suites. So click our link, odoo.com/lcnews in the description and pinned comments to try Odoo for free right now. After Diddy's arrest, he pleaded not guilty and immediately requested bail. His legal team offered a pretty sizable bail package too, saying that Diddy would put up $50 million for his release. This would have been co-signed by Diddy, his sister, his mom, his 3 adult sons, and the mothers of 2 of his children. The defense also suggested Diddy would have major restrictions on travel, a GPS monitor, and even limitations on female visitors. This was presented to Judge Andrew L. Carter, who denied Diddy's bid for release. He argued the bail package was insufficient to guarantee the safety of the community or to maintain the integrity of the case. Before that, Magistrate Judge Robin Tarnowski also denied Diddy bail, highlighting his apparent anger issues and history of substance abuse. She also voiced concern about a danger to the community or witness tampering should Diddy be released. But just this week, Judge Arun Subramanian was assigned to Diddy's case. Subramanian was nominated by President Joe Biden in 2022 and took the bench in 2023. Before that, he was a law clerk for Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Subramanian's no stranger to high-profile cases either. He's also overseeing the Department of Justice antitrust case against Ticketmaster. That's the case where the government alleges Ticketmaster has an unlawful monopoly on the market. That really came to light after the site crashed in 2022 when Taylor Swift fans rushed to get concert tickets. But back to P. Diddy. His team will make a third bid for release, this time to Judge Subramanian. In the meantime, he's still behind bars at MDC Brooklyn, and according to Diddy's legal team, the jail is notoriously dangerous and run down. Diddy's attorney, Mark Agnifilo, argues there are major issues with the jail, citing violence, poor conditions, overcrowding, and even staffing issues. He also cited some startling statistics. 2 inmates have been killed at MDC since June, and at least 4 inmates have died by suicide over the past 3 years. On top of that, 6 staff members have been charged with crimes over the past 5 years. When Diddy was first arrested, he was placed on suicide watch, which, according to the DOJ's National Institute of Corrections, is, quote, supervisory precautions taken for suicidal inmates that require frequent observation. Diddy's since been taken off suicide watch, but is still being housed in a protective care unit, actually the same one as Sam Bankman-Fried. Bankman-Fried was convicted of fraud and money laundering last November after the collapse of his cryptocurrency exchange, FTX. They're both in a separate section of MDC. That's a unit for inmates who require special protection. That's people like Diddy or Bankman-Fried who are high-profile inmates, but it also cares for other inmates who need protection as they assist in ongoing investigations in open cases. Now, according to some reports, Diddy has a few privileges that other inmates lack, including access to daily showers and slightly better food. In his nearly month-long stay at MDC, Diddy has had phone conversations with his children and even an in-person visit from his family. To take a deeper dive into Diddy's life behind bars and the likelihood that he'll soon be released, we're sitting down with attorney Randy Kessler. I mean, P. Diddy has been in the spotlight for decades. He's obviously got a pretty big bank account, living in mansions in multiple cities, and that's what he's used to. And all of a sudden, he's in a prison that's being described as deplorable. I mean, just that unto itself, is that a major change?
Of course, the bigger they come, the harder they fall. And I sort of think that's what the prurient interest of the public is. You know, Jail is terrible for anybody, but for someone who's used to having people wait on them hand and foot and never stands in line and always, gets front row and gets the best table and gets to have the exact opposite, what a life-changing moment. I mean, it's just incredible. And, it brings into context our whole system of innocent till proven guilty. Why is he not being given bond? And, we could debate that all day long. Of all people that's unlikely to flee or get away, well, he's got the resources to flee, but he's so recognizable. And isn't he innocent till proven guilty? Well, yeah, but, we have to recognize there are degrees of innocent till proven guilty. When you have this much evidence and so much stuff out there, does that affect the judge's decision whether to grant bond or not? And you can't think as a human being the judge isn't thinking that some people are more likely to be guilty than others. But the system says you're innocent until proven guilty, and it's sort of a shame that he's in jail. And what if he's vindicated? What if he's acquitted? Then how do you ever give him back those few months of incarceration? Just a lot of things going on here.
Let's talk about that bail because it was denied twice. So Diddy has been in jail for almost a month now at this point, 3 to 4 weeks. That's quite a long time and quite a far cry from what he's used to. But that bail denial, both of the judges mentioned that he has some major resources, that he could flee because he has the money, access to private jets, things like that. Do you think that's a valid argument that these judges are making, that he could just flee and run away?
I mean, it's a legitimate concern. No judge wants to wake up and read the headlines the next day. Oh, they treated this guy special and they gave him bond and now he's gone and he fled from justice. So that's what's in the back of most judges' minds. On the other hand, we deal with cases where clients have significant funds sometimes. And sometimes where there's money, you can craft a unique solution. The years ago it was the ankle bracelet and the ankle monitor, that if you had money to afford $250 a month for the process and the technical details, you could do that. And I can't imagine there wasn't some extreme, unique situation where they could pay for private security guards to monitor, to report. You know, it's just interesting to me that with all the money he has and all the resources he has, they couldn't craft some solution that lets him be under some form of house arrest. And again, it sounds like special treatment, but the truth of the matter is to incarcerate somebody like him is expensive to all of us. We're taxpayers, and he's got to have unique situations. You can't put him in general population where everyone wants a piece of him and everyone wants to be his friend and everyone. So maybe some solution where his money could help us craft. I mean, he could build his separate jail cell, and we could keep him there. Just interesting to me that they sort of said, nope, you're going to be treated not like everybody else, but a lot like everybody else. Um, just having money doesn't do it. So I wouldn't want to be those judges. There's sort of a no-win situation for the judge, and it sounds like they're erring on the side of caution. We're going to do what we would do for anybody else, which is keep him incarcerated for fear he flees, and then it's on us. This guilty person who may, or this potentially guilty person, gets to go on and live their life because the judge let them have bond. It flips from he's the bad person to now the judge made a mistake. That's what judges don't want.
Just to play devil's advocate for a second, if we're going back in the timeline of Diddy, there were federal raids performed on his home back in March. So obviously he knew about it then. He could infer, okay, they're going to investigate something. And speaking with his legal team, he again could infer charges could be coming down the line. So if Diddy was going to run, he had all the time in the world, 6 months between those raids and then when he was indicted, to run. I mean, is that something that his defense could highlight and say, hey, he could have left but didn't?
I think you should practice law because that's an excellent argument. I think it's a 100% correct argument, which is he had the opportunity to flee, except that sometimes people don't think rationally. Some people that are in power often think, I can get away with this, I can get away with this. And then when they finally realize they can't get away with it is when they try to look at other options. So, yes, it's a good argument that he had all the time in the world to try to get away. If he knew this was coming, he should have seen it, and he didn't run. Um, that's taking the approach that we're going to trust people, and unfortunately not everybody trusts people, and he's going to be locked up until they decide on whether he's guilty or innocent or takes a plea. But yes, that's the argument I'd be making if I was his defense lawyer. What are you afraid of? He could have left 100 times and he didn't, and he will give you any safeguards you want, and he'll pay for the safeguards even though he shouldn't have to. He'll pay whatever it takes so that he doesn't have to be in jail because he's innocent right now.
His defense team did bring a interesting bail package, kind of what you're talking about, a GPS monitor so that people could know where he was, a restriction on the people who could come visit him, specifically women. A lot of people were going to co-sign on this, and it was going to be $50 million. And this was denied 2 times. But now there may be a win for Diddy, potentially, that a new judge has been assigned to the case. Do you think it's possible now that this new judge reconsiders and takes the defense up on this giant bail package?
Well, Sierra, anything's possible, right? But now this judge has an even harder time, I think, because the past judge locked him up, didn't let him out, and he's still there available for trial. If the new judge lets him out on bond and something goes wrong, and this isn't the analysis that I'm proud to make, right? We shouldn't be saying, well, judges are worried about their own skin and how they look if something bad happens. And maybe this new judge has a broader view and says, you know what? If he's willing to part, and again, I don't think the money's the issue. $50 million is a high bond, but it's not a question of how bad was the crime. The bond issue is what is the likelihood that this person would avoid trial and skip town and forfeit their bond? Most people would rather go to trial than give up $100,000. But he apparently has the money and the wherewithal to say, if there's a chance I'm going to jail for the rest of my life, they can keep the $50 million. I'm going to some country where they can't extradite me. So the amount of money is really not as telling as the fact that all these other accommodations, they can't find one that secures the judge in his mind or her mind that, okay, he's not going to be able to leave town with those restrictions in place. I'm comfortable. But, at least the lawyers know what's been turned down before, and they're getting another crack at it. You never know.
So we talked about the potential for bail, and we'll see if this new judge actually allows that. But for now, Diddy is behind bars at MDC, this Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. And his team has brought up some concerns about this place. I mean, By all accounts, it's not a great place to be. Not that any jail is, but the conditions sound a little bit worse than maybe other jails out there. Do you think if he isn't granted bail, his team could still say, hey, let's transfer him to a new one ahead of the trial?
They're going to try everything. They're going to try to transfer him. They're going to try to get him out. You know, in a normal case where it's a high profile person or a well funded person, the prosecution and the judge is a little bit more concerned about a wrongful prosecution because people that are mad that they're being arrested for a crime they didn't commit can turn around and file for malicious prosecution. It sounds like there's enough evidence there that they can argue with a straight face that we had a basis to go forward, right? There's so many people coming out of the woodwork that no one's going to say that they were malicious about this. They went after him without any evidence, without any basis for it whatsoever. Um, but certainly there are things that can be done, But the truth is, every jail is bad, and some jails are worse than others. And the problem again is if you move him, why is he getting special treatment? And maybe he's earned special treatment. Maybe what he's done, maybe he's given so much back to his fans and to the world and to charity that maybe there's a way that it plays out in the end. But again, to go into court and say this jail is bad, move him to another jail is not your first argument. That's sort of the everything else failed. Judge, let me at least earn my keep and get something better for my client than this horrible place that he's in. And they are going to be saying it over and over and over. Innocent till proven guilty. You're putting an innocent man not just in jail, but in a place that's not just a holding place. It's a place that's terrible, especially for him, but for anybody.
Right now, Diddy is in a protective care unit of this jail because he is a high profile name. What do you think, though? If he was moved to general population, would he actually be at any sort of risk?
There's no way they can't move him to general population. And would he be at risk? Sure, he'd be at risk. There's so many people that have nothing to lose, right? They're going to be in jail the rest of their life. They've got nothing to. They want their 15 minutes of fame. They were friends with Diddy, or they hurt Diddy, or they killed Diddy, or they did. I mean, there's so many, you know, people in jail that would this would be their moment. You can't put them there. Plus, do you want to be the judge that makes the decision, or the prosecutor that makes the decision, or the law enforcement officer, or the warden that makes the decision to move him out of isolation and into a unit where there are other people, and then something bad happens? Can you spell lawsuit? I mean, that person, aside from all the public anger and anxiety, I mean, clearly there'd be a lawsuit against the person for doing that, and they'd have to defend themselves, even if they win. Lawsuits are expensive, they're costly, get you the kind of media attention you don't want. I just don't see how they put him in with general population or other inmates at all.
Obviously, Diddy wants to leave jail because it's not a desirable place to go. But as he's preparing for a future trial, because he has pleaded not guilty to these charges, does him being behind bars make things a bit more difficult? Because his defense can't just drop over to his house or he can't FaceTime them with more info. It kind of adds a layer there of difficulty.
Yeah, logistics are important. I mean, it's very hard to work with a client who's in jail to try to help them prepare for their own defense. You're always worried about people overhearing things. You've got to schedule it. The lawyer's got to get through the security mechanisms to get into the jail. You don't want to trust the telephone line, so you've got to be in person. Much easier to prepare your own defense. And there was a case you may recall, the Young Thug case in Georgia, where the lawyer actually got held in contempt and put in jail. And he said, I want to be in the cell. I want to be in there with my client so we can at least be preparing together. There's something about being able to prepare. And why should the client, the innocent until proven guilty defendant, have to prepare on the state's terms? If you're going to prepare a defense, you should be able to do it where it's best for you, where it's most comfortable for you. And that is a big hiccup. And I don't know that it's an appealable issue because you've got two competing claims. One is the right to a proper defense, but also you've got to make sure that the person doesn't escape justice. So, but certainly that's another argument the lawyers are going to make, even if it's just a furlough, even if it's just some time out of jail for the ability to prepare his own defense. Um, that's maybe an option they're going to come up with. Maybe there's some hybrid compromise result for the new bail hearing.
You also mentioned phone calls and phone lines, which got me thinking because oftentimes in cases, we do hear in court some recorded jail phone calls, whether it's with the family members or a friend, someone, and there could be some sort of incriminating information that was revealed on these phone calls. Or we also hear about a cellmate or someone in jail who overheard or read a diary, things like that. So, do you think the prosecution is going to be keeping a close eye on Diddy while he's behind bars to see if there's anything that could help their case?
Absolutely. And people, as careful as they are, often let things slip. They might say, I can't really talk because I'm on a recorded line, but I want you to know, whatever he says is dangerous. And if I was his lawyer, I'd say, you don't talk on the phone, much less talk about your case or your situation. It's just dangerous, dangerous, dangerous to do that. Even and he should be able to talk privately to his counsel to be able to say, no, it might look like I did something wrong because I was in this place at this time. Well, if he doesn't testify, the prosecution would never know that. If they overhear that, if he has to say it through a phone line that could be recorded, it's putting a real hardship on the defense team.
It's interesting to hear your side of the story too, because we've heard so much from the prosecution about all of the evidence they have against Diddy and not as much from the defense. But again, you bring up a good point. He is innocent until proven guilty. So right now, he is an innocent man. But as far as the evidence that the prosecution does have, these charges that they're claiming they have a lot of evidence for, testimony from witnesses, do you think they have a strong case?
Sounds like they have a strong case, but whether you have 100 pounds of evidence or 1 ounce of evidence, he gets the same rights. He shouldn't get treated differently and left in jail because there's more evidence against him than there is to the next guy in the next cell. I mean, I'll tell you, good prosecutors aren't going to bring a case that they don't think they can win. When you have a celebrity, it's a double-edged sword, right? On one hand, you know, everybody wants to be the one that prosecuted the guy that nobody could take down, and they did it, and they brought down the king, and maybe that's something for somebody's ego. You would think, hopefully, instead, the prosecution is thinking, not only do we have to be careful that we don't ever convict or prosecute an innocent person, if we prosecute this innocent person and we're wrong, there's going to be payback, and it's going to be bad, and we're going to be held accountable. There are a lot of times where prosecutors could say, I could flip a coin. I'm not sure we could convict or not, but even if we try this case, what's the harm? They shouldn't think like that. They should think we can win this beyond a reasonable doubt. And I'm hoping that these prosecutors are thinking, with the evidence we have, certainly we can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. A jury could do anything. A jury could say that they don't believe us, or they don't want to put him in jail, or they don't want to find him guilty. But it sounds like they have enough from what they're saying to everybody. But again, we're Monday morning quarterbacking. We're looking from the outside. You really can't judge a case unless you've been in the courtroom, seen the evidence through the rules of evidence, and then make a decision. So I'm not going to comment on, do they have a good case? Do they have a bad case? I'm hoping they're doing their job and they're not bringing a case that they don't think they can win.
It's important to note that P. Diddy has pleaded not guilty to all the charges against him. And after his arrest, his attorney Mark Agnifilo released a statement reading in part, quote, Sean Diddy Combs is a music icon, self-made entrepreneur, loving family man, and proven philanthropist who has spent the last 30 years building an empire, adoring his children and working to uplift the Black community. He is an imperfect person, but is not criminal. To his credit, Mr. Combs has been nothing but cooperative with the investigation. Please reserve your judgment until you have all the facts. These are the acts of an innocent man with nothing to hide, and he looks forward to clearing his name in court. Diddy is due back in court next week for an upcoming hearing. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.